Two, one. All right. Welcome to part two-ish of the Swati Pandita Spotlight in the Spartie Lab podcast. We've gotten some technical issues out of the way, and we started our interesting discussion with you about your projects on self-expression and avatars and color. Um, can we jump back into the color one? So color
hmm
theory comes very much from an arts and humanities perspective. I guess mostly just arts. Um, so is there strong science behind color theory and how might it relate to avatars?
Oh, that's such a good question. So I would say that's a little bit of a hard question to answer. As a person with a visual cognition background, there there's definitely color science, which is a little bit different. It's more so the perception mm, of color. And how do we kind of break that into measurable parts and components? But in terms of color theory, which I very much think of as color meaning making,
Hmm.
mm, that's I I can't say that I'm a total expert on this, so I want to be extremely cautious with my wording here. Um, I think there has been a lot of work on color meaning making, but it hasn't necessarily um, there's not much of a consensus yet. And I'm actually thinking of a group in particular. I can envision the paper, but I can't remember the authors' names. But essentially, um, you know, they were trying to do like a systematic review of color effects, particularly of the color red and what it means in different contexts and how that can affect behavioral outcomes. So, performance, for example, if I have a red avatar or if I'm wearing a red shirt, I might be better at a task. Because I'm seeing this context as more performative and I need to do well. Um, but in terms of,
So
mhm.
I know you
Go
want to be
ahead.
cautious here, but let's say somebody wants to choose the right avatar shirt color for class or for the workplace. What are your
Mhm.
so do you recommend red?
Ooh. Honestly, I personally am more of the calm type, so I would prefer or I would gravitate more towards like a blue or a green. But this comes more
Mm.
from color design and more from I would say probably work in applied psychology and marketing. Um, so that I can't necessarily say I've read all of the literature. So I'm talking more so from like a design sense and design intuition, which I think a lot of people have, and a lot of people in the human computer interaction space or the HCI space use. But it is rare for us, and what we've seen in the scoping review, particularly in the context of social virtual environments, when color is used, it's not really justified. There have been some papers actually, um, I think by some earlier work on dressing up in a like white cloak avatar versus a dark cloak avatar. I think that
Hmm.
was Jorge, like Pina's work, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yep, that was Pena, Hancock, and
Pena.
Marola,
Yes. Oh my goodness.
2007 or 9. Um,
That is an
yeah.
amazing memory.
Well, I cite it a lot when I talk about the Proteus effect because it's one of the
Yes.
earlier studies, indeed. Yeah, and so color there kind of signifies sociality,
Association. Hmm.
antisocial, it wasn't just color, also the avatars looked like KKK
Hmm.
members in certain cloaks, and they did indeed find effects on the ways that people behaved and interacted. Um,
Yes.
or like oh no, that one they looked at, do you remember what the outcome was? How they measured?
Mm,
It was social or antisocial messaging in
mm.
in some stories that they wrote. They did thematic tests. So yeah,
Ooh,
so avatar color matters. Avatar clothes matter, and avatars are
yes,
like clothes themselves, right?
I agree.
So what
Um,
about like the non-clothing aspects of avatars? Like the like what matters more, an avatar shirt? Because when we say avatar color, we could also mean skin color or
mm-hmm.
glasses color or face or hair. Like people care a lot about avatar hair. Um, so why color and
I
in a
mean,
clothing way?
you're asking all the right questions. Why color? Because we do know that color does obviously mean something, right? Just from a neuroscientific perspective, um, or evolutionarily speaking, we use color as like a fast heuristic or fast cue, whether or not we should approach something, whether or not something you can even think of food. If it's more dull colored, it might not be as edible. If you're used to seeing it more vibrant. Um, and also it's great at capturing attention, right? If I'm and we can even think about like makeup, for example, is great, right? If I put more contrast and color, if I'm wearing red lipstick and maybe if I filled in my eyebrows more, whatnot, you would be more focused on my face. And maybe potentially the features that I want people to be more focused on. Avatars work in a very similar way, right? If I want people to focus more on how I clothe my avatar and my style, that might say something more about my group affiliation, right? Kind of going back to the Pina study that we had mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to your question of like, okay, well, what matters more? I have to be a little bit evil and be like, depends on the context. It depends on who's using it, which is like not everyone's favorite answer. But what we have been seeing in this review preliminarily is that, um, you know, kids, for example, like to use avatar colors that range out of the naturalistic skin tone, right? So instead of your browns or your beiges or things like that, like kid avatars are going to be neon green and red and blue. Um, and once again, that also depends on the context, whether they're using an avatar to play a game for leisure, for fun, or if it's for an educational context. Um, what we do kind of see is for more kind of what I would say serious social interactions. So for education, and for like clinical contexts, for meetings or conferences in VR, um, people do tend to make a kind of hybrid avatar of themselves. And by that, I mean human-like avatar usually has the same what we call base features. So, skin tone, hair color, height. We might kind of like makeup, we might kind of accentuate certain features of ourselves. So it really depends on what aspects of your identity you want to be focused on in
Hmm.
your avatar interaction.
This reminds me a little bit of some of the work Dominic Cow did in his PhD at MIT with
Hmm.
Fox Harrell, where they
Hmm.
looked at aspects of avatar identity and um, and kind of like badges or other markers of identity that are not related to gender or race, and thereby allow
Hmm.
people to kind of emphasize who they are in a way that distracts from some stereotypes that have been shown to influence perceptions of avatars. in that context. And so, is this project in a way related to the work? I know that Dominic has a career grant from the NSF dealing with similar topics. Um,
Mhm.
so, is this kind of an offshoot of that general stream of studies?
So I will say I believe so. We're really interested in figuring out what are the best ways to, or hmm, best ways, or rather best options to give people to customize their avatars. So, in part, it answers that broader question of what aspects of identity are important. We know that color is a great way to express identity. And then, how might learners, because Dominic is very interested in education, particularly like computer science education. And so, what aspects of identity, particularly which color is important, are going to really help learners get the most out of these learning environments.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. That's great. That's really interesting research. And you've been an avatars researcher for a while, coming out
I
of,
can't believe it.
I know, coming out of Cornell, working with Andrea Stevenson Wan, whose advisor is Jeremy Bailenson, who's my mentor. So that makes me like your academic uncle or something.
I love that. Are you the cool uncle?
Oh, you know it. The cool uncle who tries to be too cool and use Gen Alpha slang. But yeah,
You're
so we've worked together a long time, Swati,
mhm,
and so tell me a bit about your journey and how you see your kind of plans and the fields that you want to interact with. If this is the
mhm,
spotlight on Swati, can you give us
mhm,
like a high level of like, I started off in, this field. I remember some
mhm,
of this, how
mhm,
you got to
mhm,
com, how you moved to
mhm,
Caltech and got
mhm,
into neuro, and now you're moving back. Like, what's the
mhm.
overall trajectory there?
Ooh, all right. So I will say I very much remember my senior year of college. I was in a neuroscience seminar, and one of the sections or one of the readings we had talked about like neuroscience and virtual reality. So I'm going to date myself and say this was like the 20 around like 2012 or whatnot. So for the viewers, right, like consumer VR was finally becoming a thing at that point.
Hmm.
And I just remember being a very, we'll say picky, for lack of better words, college student and being like, VR is not there yet. There, these avatars are going to distract people. Like the visual fidelity is no good. Robbie, I was a hater. I was a hater and I'm calling myself out now. I was like, there's no way. And so at that time, I was like, I want to really understand how tech can be used for mental well-being. So that has always been my kind of North Star, if you will. And then another part of me, and this was actually, I'm very fortunate to go to a liberal arts college, so a plug there, um, is related to how people are represented in media, specifically how mental illness is represented in media and in marginalized populations.
Hmm.
Um, so I can say with 2020 hindsight, yes, I knew this all along. Um, but now that I can have a moment to reflect on it, those were my main two interests were tech and well-being, as well as representation and well-being. So I went to Cornell for my master's, really to pursue that first part, the tech and well-being. And it was there that I didn't bag one of those awesome summer internships. And I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? And then I got a research position over the summer um, at the SciComm lab with Dr. Don Schrader, who unfortunately just passed away in
Oh,
January.
sorry to hear it.
Yeah, she amazing mentor, and that's how I learned about the field of communication. And
Hmm.
I was like, where has this been my whole life? And in that's when I started to realize like, oh, this blends together, social psych, it blends together neuroscience, it blends together tech, and most importantly, calm, like what is being said, why is it being said? Um, and then that's also how I met my advisor, Dr. Andrea Stevenson Wan. And I think from there, I really was just interested in avatars and representation. So that second half that I kind of mentioned earlier on. And I got to dig more into that. And you'll kind of see a pattern here. Once I dig into something, I kind of miss the other thing. And so that's when I went back to neuroscience because unfortunately, due to the pandemic, I had a project where I finally got to blend the two together, try to really understand how does the brain represent self avatars, so self similar photorealistic avatars. Does it account for for an avatar actually being a part of me? Which there's a brain region that does do that, right? This is self-salient information. I'm encoding this. This is important. Um, versus, oh, this is similar to me, but not me. Is there
Hmm.
a distinction there at the neural level? So
Hmm.
we had designed a cool experiment for that, but unfortunately, higher forces had another plan and the pandemic hit. So I thought that, oh man, I won't get any neuroimaging experience, but lo and behold, I got to work with some really cool people. Dr. Dean Mobbs, the director of the Fear Lab at Caltech, and hone my skills there. So now, with all this experience in mind, that's kind of how I ended up at the Virtual Futures Lab. Um,
Hmm.
Taking that background in both visual cognition and now social cognition and neuroimaging, communication. And I'm actually, in a different department. I'm in computer science now. So um, it's really fun to address the same question of why does avatar representation matter and to who, and in what context is it, effective or not effective,
Hmm.
from multiple different angles. So I
Yeah.
hope that answers your question.
It does. It does. Wow, you've thought about avatars from more fields as a grounding than anyone else I know in any field. So that's great. I think it's make you a stronger scholar than all of us who sit in our little silos.
I don't
So,
know. I'm hoping for that more multidisciplinary future that we're working towards.
mhm.
But thank you so much for your kind words.
Of course. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so what project are you excited about? Let's say you could launch an unlimited budget project or unlimited within reason. Um,
Mhm.
to answer a pressing question for the field, something you've wanted to know about. Is it this neuroscience brain region question? Is it avatar colors? Is it something totally different because those projects are reactive? So, what would you proactively want
Mhm.
to study in the next 5 years if you could get a $1 million grant for 5 years?
I would want to better map out the relationship between self and avatar. I know that we have a lot of amazing foundational work, and maybe part of that is just more integration.
Mhm.
but kind of going off of the um, is the avatar an extension of the self from a neuroimaging perspective? I'm very interested in. Um, and I would want to kind of flesh that out more. So earlier, I at this point, I think it was in part one I mentioned this where avatars are such a good way of understanding and making metacognition tangible. And this has so many effects, not just for healthcare broadly, but also education. And once again, those relational aspects. So yes, if I had endless money, it would first be the kind of I guess the academic in me and is let's map out this theory better. Let's make it even more concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And the second half of this invincible plan would be then to use that knowledge for things like the Emotional Expressivity Project. I do think avatars have so much value in part because they are highly visual.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we combine that with other forms, such as like tactile feedback, also voice feedback, in ways to help people express themselves, and in more meaningful ways. So it's I guess a grand project plan, but I'm really interested in, you know, using kind of what we have already to study the intangible.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. I like that. I guess it's an unlikely $1 million grant to only study the theory. But then I can see so many applied applications once you've mapped these things out and you can kind of see the application spaces concretely. Maybe we really can write that $1 million grant together.
Yes, let's do it after the MEMP paper.
Oh yes, the motivations for avatar mediated communication paper. That's on our radar. Oh, we have so many things on our radar. But one thing I wanted to show you when you talked
hmm
about connections to avatars
hmm
is this model of avatar effects that I've been putting together for the book. Have I talked to you
Ooh,
about this?
you have talked to me about the book in a broad way, but I want to hear more about this model. I'm very excited.
Oh yeah, okay, get ready. This is for the Avatars, What They Are and Why They Matter book, which is forthcoming in press from Polity at the end of November-ish, I hear. And I'm just
Exciting.
working on edits right now. I'm working on the definition chapter, which builds very heavily on the Oxford Encyclopedia chapter that we worked on together,
hmm
defining avatars. Okay, so I do this model in three parts
hmm
to not overwhelm people. So this is what the slideshow shows here. So avatar characteristics that you observe influence the schema associated with those characteristics, and that triggers a change in self-concept. You associate aspects of the self through self-perception with those avatar-related concepts, and then that influences your behavior and attitudes. The phenomenon also widely known as the Proteus effect, as you know well, right, Swati?
hmm
Okay, so now we get into um,
Ooh. Ooh,
this.
you
So it's the
break it
same
down. I love
left to
this.
right, but now we have avatar user connections like you were just talking about. And there's so many ways to talk about avatar user connections. Identification and embodiment are most well known, but self-presence, some people know about, certainly me, if I tortured myself with the dissertation in it. User avatar bond is another one. Self-relevance is another way to think about self-presence. Fluency is
Mhm.
another one. Do you remember fluency?
I
It's
I do
only in like
remember
one
fluency.
paper. Yeah.
Mm,
It's kind of like being fluent in Avatar. Um, or being fluent in avatar
Avatar
control
speak
is
almost.
essentially like, having a mental model that allows you to control the avatar easily. So then if
Hmm
all of a sudden the control schema gets switched and left is right and up is down, or you're using some weird keyboard keys, then your fluency is diminished. Right.
hmm
So then that reminds us that there are different ways to increase or decrease avatar user connection. So I try to like uh, differentiate these predictors from the actual connections. So
hmm
controllability, modality richness, etc. And then get ready, it's about to get really nuts. Boom.
My gosh.
So here are all the things that don't fit easily into um, the model. And
Hmm
so one that I'm most excited about is avatar autonomy. The more you see the avatar as
hmm
autonomous, the more you then perceive it as a social other, which would decrease the extent to which the avatar's
hmm
characteristics get integrated into self-concept, right? Because now you're seeing it as someone else. But at the same time, the more autonomous it is, the more it might influence you socially. So the
Yeah.
avatar might still influence your behaviors and attitudes, but not through the Proteus effect proper, but through like a mechanism of social influence. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, this model would be really
Um,
fun to test through 25 different studies.
you're giving back to the community, Robbie.
I don't
Quick,
know.
quick, I'm also thinking about potential listeners, as you were mentioning with H20 with avatar autonomy, would the doppelganger effect be a good example here?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually, I talk about doppelgangers in the text when I describe kind of how to conceptualize autonomous avatars or AI avatars, as we might call them.
hmm
And doppelgangers are avatars that look like you but aren't controlled by you. And Jeremy Bailenson and colleagues studied this in, I don't know, the early 2000s or at least the
Yep.
2010s. Um, but now we're finally seeing it in the context of AI. And so yeah, I mean people are influenced by their doppelgangers. If your avatar is drinking the
hmm
Kool-Aid, you're more likely to drink it too, even if you're not controlling it to drink the Kool-Aid.
Self-similarity is a strong mechanism.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Where is self-similarity? Let me see. Oh well, that's part of identification.
Yep.
Um, but then do we have Yeah, control. I think I talk about that within the text.
hmm
Um, yeah, one thing I realized is missing from this, so I'm gonna edit this for the book, is a self-discrepancy, which in some ways is the opposite of self-similarity, right?
hmm
But I think
Um,
it needs to be explicit here. Go on.
a lot of my early work looked at self-discrepancy. So,
Hmm.
um, in light of making sure everyone's understanding. So self-discrepancy theory, I believe, is from Higgins' work, and this idea that uh, also builds off of the self-presentation work by Goffman, actual self, ought self, and why
Ideal
am I
self.
forgetting? Ideal self. There we go.
Hmm.
The one that everyone focuses on, ideal self. And what was particularly interesting to me in that regard was, and this could be a future study idea too for people out there, is um, the discrepancy between ideal and actual self, or actual self and ought self. Um, we do know that with individuals with depression, that discrepancy tends to be larger, and it tends to be correlated with um, more symptom severity for depression. So, thinking about that in terms of the avatar space, right, makes it very helpful for identifying individuals who might also be stressed by this, right? Some people might just, and we know, like some people make avatars and they're like, oh yeah, this is me, this is good. Didn't really think about it, but that's fine. Like that is helpful information. But for individuals that when they create an avatar and they're creating it in the space of maybe this should be my ideal self, it might activate some kind of um, knowledge of that self discrepancy. So I went a little bit on a tangent there, but I do think that incorporating differences in self conception, once again, that metacognition is really important to capture with avatars.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and indeed, there's so much metacognition that can go on in these many variables, but self-discrepancy is a big one. And I like that it's rooted in that possible selves literature from
Hmm.
um from psychology in I think it was like the 40s, 1940s. And yet it's stuck with us now into this modern day of dynamic self-representations and mediated spaces. Yeah. Okay. So what is your hope for the field then? Let's round us out here, Swati, with our
Hmm.
spotlight on you. Part two has gone a little bit longer than part one. And by the way, if you're if you just started with part two here and you're wondering what part one is, it's on the Spartie Lab YouTube videos or live site. We started with a stream and then decided to switch modalities here. But yeah, what are your hopes for the field or yourself, Swati? What would you like to share to close this out?
Ooh, what a thoughtful question. I suppose that my hopes for the field would be um, more multidisciplinary work. So being able to work both in communication, human-computer interaction, and then social psych and affective neuroscience. And I should not forget computer science as well. Um, I hope that we as Avatar scholars can come together. I think right now, because of differences in kind of language and how we approach the research, it's not, we're not quite there yet, but maybe a shameless plug for the initiative that I'm part of here, which is the Immerse initiative at UIUC. And that's spearheaded by Sarita Adve. Um, that's we just also had a conference here and we got together a lot of generally VR and XR researchers
Oh
from
my
very
gosh, yeah,
different
how has that not come
backgrounds.
up? I want to hear a little bit more about that. Let's slow down this
I
conclusion. Yeah, tell us
oopsies.
about your Immerse conference. Go ahead.
I promise I meant to mention it earlier, but we got onto avatars and theory, man. That's
That's true. I understand what happened, but go on. How was it?
um it was amazing. And I think I kind of buried the lead. That was why I wanted to come here to UIUC. I very much buried it. My bad. Working at Cornell and working at Caltech, you're at institutions that have extremely brilliant minds. But I think like most academics, we do tend to silo ourselves. So this was the first time where I went to a place and I felt, other than the Meaningful XR conference, I felt that, oh, I can speak the VR and XR language, and I don't necessarily have to, um, kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Not necessarily code switch per se, but
Hmm.
over explain.
Hmm.
Um, and to work with people that are aware of the limitations of the XR space, and are still optimistic about it, and
Hmm.
not necessarily like a, for lack of better words, a tech bro optimism.
What isn't the metaverse dead? Is what everyone else says. But yeah, no, I'm with you. Maintaining optimism, but also not tech bro optimism. Like, yeah, metaverse, crypto, go.
hmm Go. Um, but just to see how much excitement there still is after, especially during the pandemic, we saw a huge surge and increase in, um, the metaverse and whatnot, and now there's more of a focus on AI. And what was really interesting too at this conference was, sorry, symposium was focusing on, okay, how can we use both and still keep XR the main priority? So I would say just from a, my cup is so full right now as a researcher. That is the best way I can explain that conference. We had really awesome speakers from Google and um, from Meta. We also actually, Jeremy also came to give an awesome talk. There were so many questions asked at that talk. It was awesome. So yeah, it is a very unique space to be in. And we also have so many like dedicated labs to XR initiatives. I can't say any like I can't stop. I could keep gushing.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, yeah, I only found out about the conference a little late in the game. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend because I was double booked, but I would love to attend in the future and maybe find a connection with Meaningful XR so that the two conferences could come together. I should talk to
hmm
Dominic about this. And we are
Yeah.
looking for our future host location for Meaningful XR. Uh, not, I know exactly and need someone who and there are other conferences that are similar. Miami's done an XR
hmm
conference the last few years. The dates are a little bit different here, but this immersed one, I guess it's been done before or no? What do you
Yeah, so
remember?
this was the second year. I
Second
did
year,
not go
okay.
to the first year,
Hmm.
but the second year, um, typically from what I've noticed, it's been end of April, almost last week of April. So a pretty good time right before graduation for
Hmm.
everyone. Um, but yeah, we also focused on building out immerse initiatives. So, a big part of the work here is advocating for why XR is important.
Hmm.
And actually, Dominic, Mike Yao, and a couple of other scholars. And Mike Yao is actually a communication scholar. So that's why I was particularly happy because we have people from
Hmm.
CS, we have people from um, coming together. We have people from education, really trying to help with the foundations of they're working on what's called a human experience thrust of XR. So
Hmm.
really focusing a bit on what I had mentioned too, of like, oh, we need a little bit more theory with self-avatar relevance. Um, they more so are working on um, how is human experience being studied in all of these different research domains, and how can we kind of make a kind of, I would say, corpus, but also working dictionary or encyclopedia of all of the research that has been done in the XR space, um, and say like, this term is synonymous to this term in XYZ fields.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that initiative is also pretty awesome. And that's only one. They have multiple initiatives here. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good place for VR scholars.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's on my radar, and maybe it's on three more people's radars who made it this far in the episode.
Yay!
So thank you for sticking with us, Swati. So fun to have a chat. Let's do it again. Let's continue to spotlight you, if we can make the time for it. And we need to make the time to finish some papers as well. But
Sounds
this was a
good.
nice little aside from some of that more from the rigmarole of academic life.
We can make it VR chats. I already have another topic in mind.
Oh yeah. What's the topic? Let's tease it.
Future of avatars,
Hmm.
particularly seeing certain big media companies buy out other avatar platforms and what they might be using avatars for. I think the
Oh, you
future of
mean
avatars.
Netflix ruining Ready Player Me?
Oh, that's a
That's
hot take.
yeah. Oh man, I mean, I like Ready Player Me. The CEO
Hmm.
was on this very podcast in the
Hmm.
early days,
Hmm.
and I thought they had a great vision, and I thought their vision was aligned well with the kind of metaverse writ large, right?
Hmm.
Interoperability, avatars that can
Hmm.
move between worlds and platforms and coding bases. And apparently Netflix as well. Maybe Netflix will save it. I mean, I like Netflix
I think
as
there could be
a company for many
be
reasons, but yeah.
yeah, I think there could be some cool ways in which they could incorporate avatars, particularly like with games, but we'll
Hmm.
leave that teaser
Yeah.
there.
Let's do that next time, Swati. Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Save, thank you so much.
All right. Bye, audience.
Bye.